I'd like to begin my sermon with an additional Advent scripture reading, though it's not one that is commonly read during this in church services, because we're more into Advent scriptures from wily prophets like Isaiah and woolly prophets like John the Baptist, and winsome announcements from angels on high. You know, more dramatic things like that. Nevertheless, from the book of James, chapter 5, verses 7 through 11, comes another word. Be patient, therefore, beloved, until the coming of the Lord. The farmer waits for the precious crop from the earth, being patient with it until it receives the early and the late rains. You also must be patient. Strengthen your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is near. Beloved, do not grumble against one another so that you may not be judged. See, the judge is standing at the doors. As an example of suffering and patience, beloved, take the prophets who spoke in the name of the Lord. Indeed, we call blessed those who showed endurance. You have heard of the endurance of Job, and you have seen the purpose of the Lord, how the Lord is compassionate and merciful. The journalist Kate Braestrup had an experience none of us would ever hope to face. Her husband, Drew, was a police officer and was killed in a car accident, leaving her a young widow with 4 small children. No one but his wife knew that Drew had a secret ambition. A bit avant-garde for your commonplace police officer, he had long hair and an earring. He was a Unitarian Universalist. Drew had dreams of going to seminary and becoming a pastor. He dreamed of being a chaplain in law enforcement, a chaplain who accompanies police officers to homes when bad news is delivered, news that ultimately was delivered about him to his wife and 4 children. A year after Drew's passing, Kate, his wife, decided to follow in his footstep dreams. She went to seminary and became a pastor. Now, Kate is one of the first chaplains to the warden service of the state of Maine. Kate joins search and rescue workers in the cold, snowy Maine wilderness. She is the chaplain to game wardens, to the injured, and to those who wait and grieve for news of their loved ones who may or may not return to them. She writes about this experience in her memoir, Here If You Need Me. Snowmobile accidents, ice fishing tragedies, foul play, missing persons. Kate is there to be a witness to the sacred, someone sent into the wilderness, not as a prophet, as spoken of in Isaiah, or as the wild and woolly John the Baptist we hear of in Matthew and Mark's gospel, but in the Maine game service standard issue, bottle green sweater, cargo pants, and stocking cap. The memoir begins by Kate recounting the story of a little girl, Allison, who went missing from a family picnic. Allison chased after her dog who went into the woods, and the dog came back to the picnic site a while later, but Allison did not. The search and rescue team was called out in varying degrees of hopefulness for a live return. And Kate was called to be with the desperate family. The family quickly told Kate that they were atheists, but they held her hand to the point of pain for a long time anyway. Kate sits with them for hours, holding their hand in mutual pain. Kate writes, "Little kids who get lost in the woods do something really smart. When they realize they're lost, they find a snug place, like under a bush, curl up and go to sleep. Adults tend to keep moving. They keep trying to find their own way out. They think they have to solve the problem themselves. Little kids conk out and wait for the grown-ups to solve it. If Allison is under a bush asleep, she probably can't hear us calling. And this is how the main warden's service found her, says Kate. At about 3 o'clock in the morning, a few miles almost due west of the PLS, meaning place last seen, Warden Ron Dunham's canine dog named Grace found a little girl in an Elmo sweatshirt curled up under some bush. Warden Dunham and Allison came walking out of the woods hand in hand past the Salvation Army food wagon and into the parking lot, with canine Grace trotting proudly ahead. And Kate says, "My whole lovely job at that moment was to bear witness to rejoicing and to join in the gladness of the coming day." Isaiah assures us, we will be fed by the shepherd. We will be gathered like lambs in the shepherd's arms. We will be carried close to the divine heart and gently led to the mother sheep. And James exhorts us, "Be patient, therefore, beloved, until the coming of the Lord. The farmer waits for the precious crops from the earth, being patient with it until it receives the early and the late rains. You also must be patient. Strengthen your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is near." Comfort and patience, two deeply desirable and at times completely unattainable realities. Can you imagine if Kate simply told this family to be patient? How do you think they would hear that? How would you hear that? But she didn't tell them to be patient. Rather, she joined them in their waiting. She held their hands. She embodied patience. She talked with them, listened to them, let them tell the same story over and over. How Allison went bounding into the woods, how the dog came back, how they called out for her. And Kate's job was to be presence, a witness to the sacred. "Comfort, oh comfort my people," says your God. I've never had such a heart-stopping moment as this. But like many of you, I've had moments of panic, deep worry, runaway fear. Torrin and I spent a little over 7 years in Morgantown, West Virginia, pastoring a small Church of the Brethren and Mennonite church. About a week or so after we arrived, Torrin and I had a late-night craving for Kentucky Fried Chicken. We were moving in, we'd been unloading boxes, we were tending around the clock to Sebastian, who was still a baby at the time. And it was 9:30 at night, and we really didn't know the Morgantown streets very well. And that, my friends, is a recipe for disaster. Because GPS wasn't standard at that point. In fact, this was before smartphones. And we were Midwesterners, used to roads laid out in a grid style. Roads in West Virginia are not like that. We weren't even sure there was a KFC in Morgantown. All we knew is that we really wanted it. So Torrin went out to get it. A half hour passes, then an hour. My panic has ratcheted sky high. Of course, he didn't take the cell phone. Of course, I was picturing a car accident. So I called the hospital, and I called the other hospital. 2 hours passed. I called Lois, who was the interim pastor at that point at the church, and she was still around to help us in the transition. I was so embarrassed as a new pastor, calling up and exhibiting this level of fear and vulnerability, losing my mind, picturing what it would be like to be a young widow with a child. She was kind and calm. We talked. She told me she could come wait with me. No, I said, I'll call you back when I find out something. Why did I want that chicken? Then I call my mother-in-law, Bev. She says the cool, soothing things that I hope I would if in the similar situation with a panicking person. She says she is picturing Torin wherever he is, surrounded by light that is protecting him. Well, while we were talking, 2.5 hours after Torin left the PLS, that is, place last seen, the car pulls up. I quickly get off the phone with Bev, run down the steps of the driveway, and like a scene from a movie, simultaneously hit him and kiss him. Where were you? I've been worried sick. How hard is it to find a KFC? Of course, explanations followed, which were justified, but just rang empty as my blood pressure normalized and my anxiousness started coming under control. And later, as I was talking to Bev, my mother-in-law, about that time, she reflected on my panic. She said it was clear that nothing she could say would help take away the anxiety. Nothing would really help me in that moment. So she said, I just had to be patient for you. She had to hold my panic because it was clear that words weren't going to calm me down. And I knew that I wasn't alone. She didn't tell me to be patient. She helped me picture God surrounding Torin. The interim pastor, Lois, she didn't tell me just to wait it out. She told me she would come wait with me. When faced with crises, decisions, and possibilities in our lives, it can seem like there are only two choices, both perhaps looking a bit like patience. We can run around like adults do in the wilderness, trying to figure it out ourselves or solve the problem and take control. The perception of patience here comes in the logical steps we think we are taking. We're being reasonable about it. We're not panicking. We're making decisions. And that kind of looks like patience sometimes. Or we can be like children, curl up cozy under a bush, wait it out, become oblivious to the reality and let someone else take charge. The perception of patience here comes in the giving up, the passing out, the wake me up when it's all over attitude. But that isn't the sense of patience I get from the Advent stories we encounter during this most impatient of seasons, ironically. Mary and Joseph, Elizabeth, or Jesus, or John, or James, or Isaiah. What I notice about the scriptural calls to patience this day, all the talk of the glorious day in the future there might be, is that I realize it's not just a platitude to an individual. It's an invitation given in the midst of relationships. The relationship between Mary and Joseph, between Elizabeth and Mary, James speaking to a community of early Christians. Platitudes of patience is not what this is about. It's about being the bearers of God's love for those who find it impossible to wait by themselves. A place none of us should ever be, but a place many of us will find ourselves. So we don't say, just wait it out to someone in pain. We say, let me wait with you. We don't say, it's God's plan. We say, God is here in my love for you. We don't say, well, it's all for the best. We say, I know it hurts, and I will be here with you. We don't simply say, my thoughts and prayers are with you. We say, I will do what I can. We don't say, just be patient. We say, as James said, I will hold you so your heart can be strengthened. The Advent stories point not just to a person being born, but to a community that is being born. A community born of love where, as Chaplain Kate says, we bear witness to one another in rejoicing and in pain. And that, my friends, is the beauty of our choice to be here in this community. Because when it's our turn to panic or grieve or be fearful, we can trust that there are those here who will respond to the prophet's call, who will wait upon you, who will love you, who will carry you when you can't walk and be a light in your darkness. May you be doing the heart work of strengthening this season of waiting with others, of being present when patience might otherwise be lost in the wilderness.